to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 149 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 5 of A Storm of Swords, that's Davos 1.
You know, at 149, normally we'd be preparing some sort of special thing for our 150th. We did it at 50, we did it at 100, but I think we've...
These milestones just come around so often these days.
I know, it's just, just another episode, I guess. Anyway, so we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide you some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I am doing well, It is a big week in the Ray house on multiple levels.
Do tell.
Well, as you know, Ethan is in the process, we're in the process of moving him to a town about 2.5 hours away.
I have to confess, that process has taken so long that I've entirely lost track of it. It feels like he moved 2.5 weeks ago. I don't know how it has taken this long. It's like, I'm imagining you're in like some kind of like caravan, like the, like Cersei and Robert heading to the Winterfell.
Yeah. Well, he signed his lease like about a month ago, but he doesn't move in. He officially moved in on Thursday, and we weren't planning on moving down. We were planning on moving them all down there on tomorrow through Monday. We were going to stay the night down there, but he had to be there in person to do some lease things. So he had to be there on Thursday when his lease started. So that's why he and I were down there on Thursday. Now, today I pick up the U-Haul, and we load it full of the furniture that he went shopping for in our house. And then...
How were the prices?
Yeah, they were rock bottom prices, except for they cost me a lot because Stacy went out and bought 2 new couches and 2 new beds. He only took 1 bed. She bought 2 beds. What's going on there? He took 1 couch. She bought 2. He took 1 bed. She bought 2. So it's like the opposite of buy one, get one.
Yeah.
It's buy one, buy a second. But that's the first, big thing we got going on in the house. But the other thing we have going on is Molly got her driver's license on Wednesday.
Oh my goodness!
I know.
I remember when she was just a twinkle in your eye.
I that's right. We were office mates when Stacy and I decided we were going to go for 2, and she got her license on Wednesday, and so. Much like Ethan's first solo drive, I watched her go down the driveway and turn onto our street to go up to the main road.
Yeah.
And I basically was like running behind out in the road directing traffic. But so I couldn't be there. Because of the quarantine and everything, it's all backed up. The driver's license acquiring process is all backed up. So we had to drive, Stacy and Molly had to drive about 1.5 hours away to find a spot for her to basically just hand in her driver's log and get a formal license and of course pay a fee. And Stacy happens to have clients, patients out in that town that she and Molly were in. So it was a dual thing. So she was working while she was getting Molly her driver's license, and so I didn't go. On the way back, they stopped to get gas, and Stacy's like, "Oh, here's a good opportunity for me to teach you how to use a gas pump." And so they both get to the pump, and Molly's like, "No, wait, I want to do it myself. I think I know how to do it. I want to do it myself." So she puts Stacy's credit card in, of course, not her own. She's not a fool. Mm-hmm. And then she hits 87, the gas grade, and she grabs the pump and spins around to put it in the car. But she grabbed the pump in a way that she also squeezed the handle. So gas starts spewing out everywhere. And she's like in a panicked state of shock, and she's just holding it, and its gas is just spewing everywhere. And Stacy's going, stop, stop, stop. So Molly, in her panic shock, instead of releasing the handle, tries to put her hand over the end of the nozzle. So that's gonna do it. She did not realize that the squeeze, that there was a part of the handle she was squeezing. Stacy said their clothes, it was all over their shoes and their pants. They had another hour plus drive back to the house, and the car stunk of gasoline the whole time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so,
Poor Molly. Maybe for the 150th, we should get Molly on video again and laugh at her about that.
Yeah, she was there for her 50th. So, yes, big week. And Molly has hopefully learned her lesson about how to not use a gas pump.
Honestly, I didn't think there was a lesson to learn, but I stand corrected.
Apparently, Stacy didn't either. I told Stacy, I was like, this sounds like there was some sort of education gap here between the two of you. And she was like, no, why would anyone think to grab the handle and squeeze the lever at the same time?
If you ever take that kid to the gun range, be real careful. She holds it by the trigger immediately.
So how are you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm okay. We're I have a tiny little story. A friend left work, had their last day of work yesterday, and because all of my friends are soccer friends, basically, we played one last soccer match with him, and it was time to stop. We were all melting in the heat, and it was overtime for us to go back to work. But we got a corner, and I was on his team, and I took the corner and I put it right on his head, and he headed it home, and we finished with that.
That's the way you ride off into the sunset.
Exactly. The stars aligned perfectly.
That's good stuff.
Oh,
Do I know this friend?
His name's Philippe.
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah.
I know him through you, through
soccer.
Yeah.
You
played soccer with him for more than a decade.
He's the one who I've been on the European soccer trips with several times.
Right, yes.
All right. Well, we've padded as much as we can, but it is time to get down to business on the shortest chapter in the Song of Ice and Fire. So let's get down to business. How did we leave Davos, the Onion Knight, Seaworth? Last we saw of Davos, it was looking pretty bad. Honestly, I'm just glad to see him still having a POV, because I thought he was a goner.
Yep.
He was de-shipped in the Blackwater rush by the explosion of the wildfire. So now he's in the water along with lots of men, lots of ships, lots of wildfire.
Right.
The current of the river was taking him towards the boom chain, which Tyrion and Bronn had so carefully put in their way. The boom chain was backing up with flaming ships of fire. So it wasn't just a chain anymore, which a human swimmer could swim under and come out the other end. It's now thick with burning ships. Yes. So he's being dragged towards this, and we assumed his death was certain. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
All right. Well, Davos is alive, as you just explained. He's doing fine. Feather bed, glass of fine wine at hand. Well, okay. Not exactly, but he is alive. He's marooned on a rock formation far out in the Blackwater Bay. It's nothing more than a rock with a 15-foot spire sticking out of it. There's a small cave in the rock for pseudo-shelter, and that's about it for creature comfort. Otherwise, he's starving, dying of thirst, and sick from exposure.
God, what a whiner.
I know, really.
He watches a sail come into view. Unless it changes course, it is headed in his direction. It could mean salvation, if he wants it. He's not sure that he does. He thinks of his sons who sailed into battle with him, almost certainly dead. Why should he live when they died? He tells himself to hide in the cave until the ship goes by, and then join his sons at the bottom of the sea. He's a sailor. He's meant to die at sea.
He thinks back to the battle, how he'd been thrown from his ship, Black Betha, when the wildfire exploded. he couldn't search the water for any of his sons because the river current was swiftly taking him toward the burning hell caught in the boom chain, which you so accurately described. His first thought was to just let it do that and be done with it. Instead, he dove deep under the surface and swam for the far side of the chain in the relative calm of the open bay. But he ran out of air and passed out before surfacing.
When he woke, he was on his rock, and there he stayed ever since. Watching the sail grow larger, he reaches for his lucky pouch of finger bones he wears around his neck. That's gone too. He feels that the fire on the Blackwater took everything, and he prays to the mother for mercy. He believes he hears her reply, "You burned us." Davos responds that it was the red woman Melisandre who burned the mother. She came from Ashai to Dragonstone and won Queen Selyse over along with her queen's men in the name of R'hllor. Then she won King Stannis himself.
It was then that she burned the statues of the Seven from the Sept of Dragonstone, and later the Gods would at Storm's End, including the weirwood heart tree. It was her work, but also his. He rode her into Storm's End, rode R-O-W-E-D. He rode under her banner, rode R-O-D-E. He did nothing when she burned the statues, or even when she killed poor old Maester Crescent. It's with that thought that he begins to climb the spire on his rock.
I'm disappointed you spelled those words, because I think it would have been fun to imagine him on her back going into Storm's End. And randomly rowing on his horse. It's a dangerous climb, but now he feels he must not die. Not yet. There is something he has to do first. He successfully hails the ship, which sends a small galley to rescue him. A man on the ship asks which king Davos serves. For a moment, he's concerned it could be one of Joffrey's, but it has the striped hull of a Lyseni ship of his friend Salador San. King Stannis, is Davos' reply. Aye, and so do we. He still has a king, and he has other living sons and a wife. All reasons to live. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great that Davos is alive, but there's not a lot to go on here.
Right. Yes.
And to be fair to George Martin, describing thirst and sunburn are slightly boring after more than a sentence or two. So,
yeah, I get why this chapter is here, because it shows how there's a possible metamorphosis going on with Davos. That
yeah. The other thing I think there's a sort of like coming back together of the timelines. I think that's part of this as well. We've come back to King's Landing because the preface to this book mentioned that the timelines were slightly out, and I think now we're sort of re-establishing the timeline. This is now the present. So what you see away from King's Landing now corresponds with this.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah. This chapter, like you said, the previous chapters, there has been a lot of catching up, a lot of reminding us about what has happened at the end of Clash of Kings. And this one, more so than any other, pretty much just functions as a reminder of what Davos was up to the last we saw him. We got heavy descriptions of the battle, just to remind us what happened from his perspective, because we've also had Tyrion's perspective and Sansa's perspective, how things went wrong and how much he personally lost in the Battle of the Blackwater. And, I have enough trouble remembering what we read just a few months ago in the last Davos chapter, which I did look up. It has been a while since Davos 3. That was chapter 58 of A Clash of Kings, which we released on March 7th. So we
Oh, wow.
recorded it even, before that.
Yeah.
So we're in mid-July now, so it's been over 4 months. Anyway, but these books have been out for a long time. So to the reader who was coming from Clash of Kings,
who was reading as they were released,
yes, that book was released in November of '98, and Storm of Swords came out in August of 2000. So it had been quite a while for them too. So not exactly 11 years. George Martin's maybe Winds of Winter is taking so long because he's basically having to retell the whole story to this point.
I was going to say, the poor people who had to wait 2 years for the next book, how they suffered.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot has happened in King's Landing since we saw Davos. This was kind of his chapter was the kickoff to the Battle of the Blackwater.
Yeah.
And, it was his chapter, that kickoff from the sea perspective was a very intense, confusing time on the Blackwater for both Davos and us. So it's probably good to get a little refresher of what exactly happened there again.
Yeah.
Who did you lose? All your sons? Oh, goodness.
So the reason he's not dead already, well, I mean, there's several reasons, but the reason he hasn't died of thirst is because that rain collects in little rock pools on the rock that he's on, and he's been able to drink from those, but they've been dry for a few days now, so he's reaching sort of like a level of delirium, waiting for death or rescue. Yeah,
when he mentioned he couldn't remember because he said he thinks days are hard to track when you're marooned on a rock in the sea. He thinks it was probably 3 to 4 days. I got to thinking, how long has he been out there?
Yeah.
And I remembered Tywin telling Tyrion that Tyrion had been out of danger of dying for at least a fortnight. So Black Betha sunk at least no shorter time ago than that, because it was one of the first things that happened. We saw Tyrion watching the wildfire explode. He was fine. That was the day he got hurt. Likely the same day that Davos, was marooned. So it's been at minimum 2 weeks, if not likely longer, because we don't know exactly how long Tyrion was in peril of dying for, but he's been out of danger for 2 weeks.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be close to death at this point. There's no two ways about it. This is without food and water and shelter. You don't survive very much longer than this. So he feels a lot of guilt, particularly because he's lost children. I mean, it seems he's lost at least 4 of his sons in this battle, and possibly 5, and they were in this battle because of his devotion to Stannis. So that's sort of exacerbates the guilt.
Exactly. Yes, that losing a child is obviously a parent's worst nightmare. Losing possibly most of your children because of an action you took.
Yeah.
It's not direct, but
no.
Davos leading his sons into the sea life and supporting Stannis, it's all in his mind, his fault that his sons are likely dead. That's I could see why he's struggling to whether he wants to keep going or not.
Yeah.
So,
but he does have other children. That's one thing to bear in mind.
Yes,
he does have
absolutely.
Other children.
Yes, and he does eventually come out of his guilt-induced thoughts of suicide and realizes I have other children and I have a wife.
Yeah.
But we'll just real quick recap the sons that he likely lost.
We might as well, Mackelly. We don't have an awful lot more to talk about,
So we start with Dale. He's the oldest. He is married, but no children, as we learn in this chapter. And he was the captain on the ship Wraith.
Allard is the second son. He is captain of the Lady Maria, who's named after Allard's mother. He's the one who was renowned for speaking his mind. Davos thought that if he hadn't been raised up to be a knight by Stannis, he would have ended up on the wall.
Might be, in hindsight, I guess.
Yes.
Although he might be out on that great ranging.
Yeah.
So, regardless of the options here, neither are great. Mathos is the third son, and he was second on Davos's ship Black Betha, which Black Betha is named after Aegon V's wife, Betha Blackwood. I assumed that the second on a ship would have been the second in command, but I was curious, what does a second mean? So I looked it up. It's actually third in command based on my quick Google research. The captain is obviously first.
Right.
Chief mate is second, and then second mate is third. So, but he was standing next to Davos when the wildfire exploded, and Davos never saw him again.
Yeah, I think in the TV show, Mathos and Dale perhaps are merged into one, and you actually see him hit by wildfire in the explosion. And Davos, you sort of see it from Davos's perspective, so you're pretty sure he was killed.
Right.
But that's a TV show, it's not the same.
Right.
Marek was the oar master on the flagship Fury, so he definitely is unlikely to have survived.
Right. That was in the front row, center of the front row. And then, so he says, he doesn't, he's thinking most of this. He's probably talking to himself a bit when you're stuck on an island. Hard to tell what's thought and what's voice here. I can't remember whether there were quotations around it or not, but
if you leave me in the house for more than an hour, I talk out loud to myself. So 2 weeks on a rock, for sure.
He thinks perhaps Devon as well, meaning perhaps Devon is dead as well. And the reason he separates Devon from the others to this point is because the others were all on ships.
Right.
But Devon is Stannis' squire, so he was on the land, not on a ship. So he doesn't know. Davos doesn't know if, at this point, he doesn't know if Stannis is alive. He doesn't know if Devon is alive. And so Devon is around 12-ish, by the way. So he's a rather young one.
Davos has no idea if Devon was in the fighting or not. I mean, from what he saw, the fleet was exploded and blew up. And that would mean that there was very little chance of Stannis getting across the river to fight at King's Landing itself.
Right.
He doesn't know probably that didn't happen, because how would he get across? I mean, like, we've talked about people dancing across the boom chain before, but that's not very likely that a whole army could come across. And he certainly wouldn't know about the fact that Stannis' army was attacked on their side of the Blackwater Rush by the combined forces of Tywin and Ghost Renly and the Tyrells.
Ghost Renly, yes, right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, he doesn't know any of this. He's just, he's in a dark place because he is pretty sure four of his sons died. So, he's thinking Devon might have died as well, but yes, he doesn't know. He can only sit and wonder about that.
But from his perspective, logically, he would assume that he was not involved in the fighting, that Stannis retreated when the fleet blew up and Devon was safe.
Yeah, certainly. If he was in a rosier state of mind, he might think, oh, they probably just went back to Storm's End when things went wrong. But then he thinks at the end of the chapter, he remembers, I have other sons, and he does. He's got Stannis, which is now the oldest of the two that were left at home. And Stannis is 10-ish, and he's at home with Davos' wife, Marya.
And Stefan is 6, roughly, also at home on Cape Wrath.
So, back to what we were talking about earlier. So Davos is both fighting to survive and fighting the desire to want to survive, which would make it incredibly tough to fight off all that's trying to kill you when you're not sure you want or deserve to live.
Yeah. And he's constantly reliving the battle, which is probably what would happen if you went through that kind of trauma.
Absolutely.
But it's probably exacerbated by the fact he's got nothing else to think about. It's not like,
right.
He's got anything to distract him from this. And so the loss of his sons is constantly being stoked by these recollections.
Yeah, which, you're dying of starvation, you're dying of thirst, and he's got a fever because he's been exposed to the elements for probably, if we're thinking that this now catches us up to everything is lined up again, then it's been at least 2 weeks he's been stuck on this rock.
Yeah.
One thing you have, like you said, you have nothing else to think about but just be consumed by your grief and your feeling of responsibility that it's your fault your sons have likely died. But, one thing he doesn't do, he does not spend a lot, at least in the time we spend with him, which seems to just be like maybe a half hour of his time here. He doesn't spend a lot of time pondering the fate of Stannis, for one, so dedicated to his king. But as we've been discussing, the loss of his sons take precedent over thinking about whether his king is alive or how his king's faring.
But again, I keep thinking to myself that if I'm him and I don't have any more information, that I would just assume that Stannis retreated, because what else could Stannis do? There was no way for either side of that battle to fight the other side because there was a burning river in between them.
Right.
The fact that the boats sort of like formed a temporary bridge is far-fetched. It wouldn't occur to you.
Yeah, a few ships did get across, remember, in that Tyrion chapter, but not...
True.
You'd have to imagine it would take quite an amount of ships to get across to get critical mass.
Right, and certainly Davos's recollection of what was going on in the Blackwater rush was that no one would ever get across that river.
Right, yes, you're right. What he saw was nothing but fire and explosion. So in his mind, he probably thought there's no way any ships got across that.
Right.
Yes,
so this battle is essentially over. So that's probably why he's not spending a lot of time thinking about Stannis, because he's like, well, Stannis has abandoned me and everybody else at this point.
Yeah, that's true. He does, the very last sentence or two of the chapter does inform Davos that Stannis lives when the man on the boat says, which king do you support? And he says, Stannis. And he said, so do we. You doubt he'd be asking that question if Stannis was dead. So.
Oh, well, he might ask the question if Stannis was dead. He wouldn't say, so do we. He would say, so did we.
Yes, good point. Yes, that's the difference there. But it also possibly gives him some reassurance that maybe Devon survived as well. If the king survived, a squire might also have likely survived.
Yeah. So sort of thinking back on Davos's sort of progression to this point, back when we first met him, which was in Clash of Kings, he sounded like he always expected to be the Onion Knight, low-born from Flea Bottom, but elevated to landed knight, which meant that he would always be looked down upon by the nobles. And we've seen sort of some evidence of that in the chapters. We've seen his counsel being disregarded by the higher-born advisors.
True. You wonder how much of it, we've discussed that before, how much of it is in his head and how much of it is reality. It's probably a mixture of both.
Yeah, but the one thing about that I would say is that he always feels like when his perception is that the highborns are snickering at him, ignoring him, but Stannis never does. Now, maybe that's just him being biased towards Stannis, but maybe that is evidence that he is actually seeing a real thing happening. Because if it was all the highborn people treat me as a second-class citizen, he would feel it from Stannis too.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, that's solid, very possible. But you also imagine that he hoped that, we may have talked about this in Davos 1, I can't remember, so it was quite a while ago, but you have to imagine that he hoped that someday, maybe in his children or grandchildren's lifetime, that everyone would forget the meager beginnings of House Seaworth, and they would be treated like any other noble, and that it's not unheard of. There's plenty of examples of houses that had meager beginnings. I mean, House Baelish, Peter's great-grandfather was a Bravasi sellsword. And
right.
no one remember. I mean, they call him Littlefinger because he's from the Fingers, which is kind of a little place in the middle of nowhere. But, they don't recall that, your great-grandfather was a Bravasi sellsword. Your house means nothing. And if you remember, House Clegane, the founder of House Clegane was a kennel master who saved a Lannister lord and was raised to nobility that way. So, it very well likely would happen. And so you'd have to figure he assumed that the side glances and cold shoulders and being disregarded would pay off someday in the future through his sons.
Yes, that they wouldn't face that same thing, that they would be treated as nobles, you know.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. You could kind of see that progression happening a little bit, because back in that Davos one, when they were walking from the burned statues to when he was sitting in the pub with Salador San, and he was walking with Allard and Dale, he was thinking that his sons forget their roots already, and the older ones were alive when he
Was just a smuggler, yeah.
and he thinks that they only see the tall black ship on their sigil. They're blind to the onion. So, they're already thinking of themselves as part of nobility.
But that's a strange thought from Davos, because surely he wants that. That's what he wants for them. He wants them to act like they belong in this company.
Yes.
And in actual fact, he shouldn't have put the onion on his sigil, because that's going to be a constant reminder in the future.
Yeah, you'd have to. You could possibly imagine that a few years after Davos is gone, his sons are just like cutting the onion out of the, give me that stitch cutter.
In very much the same way the Tailors of King's Landing are sewing that surprising lion into the Baratheon sigil.
Yes. But now it's, his dream of this house being taken seriously as nobility has been heavily compromised in one battle with the loss of 4 of his sons.
Yeah. So Davos always felt that the bones that he kept in the pouch were lucky and brought, they were the sign that his family was going to be something more, because when he lost his fingers, he gained his knighthood and his elevated status. But now they are gone, along with most of his family. So it's a sort of metaphorical as well as a literal setback.
Yeah, and you wonder if he thinks the two might be related, even though they technically happened in reverse order.
Right.
The explosion happened first, then because of the swimming and the near drowning, he lost his bones. But, he's also starving and dehydrated and has quite the fever. So he might be thinking, I've lost my bones. This is why all this bad luck is happening.
As a reminder, he was given the knighthood and lands as a reward for running through the red wine blockade during the siege of Storm's End. But then, because Stannis is Stannis, he also removed his fingers for the past crimes of smuggling that he'd committed. So
that's so Stannis.
Except when it suits him.
Yes, right. So, like we mentioned in the summary, Davos thinks he hears the mother's voice when he prays to her for mercy because the fire took everything from him.
And she's got a point.
Yeah.
Praying to the god when you've just burned the effigies of the god. It's a little rich.
Yes, and he responds, it was her who burned you. The red woman, of course, he's referring to Melisandre. And, that was from Davos 1. So he kind of insinuates that Melisandre is to blame for the decimation on the Blackwater of Stannis' fleet, but it wasn't her idea to not be present there.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
Right, but if you've suddenly found religion, where Davos has here, then you could blame her for the fact that the gods didn't look after you because she was the one who burned.
Oh, yes.
But I do agree. It is a little bit unfair. Stannis was winning left and right while she was in his company. And then when she was sent away, it all went horribly wrong, so.
Yeah. Stannis made the decision to leave her on Dragonstone for this battle because some of his advisors told him she would get credit for the victory if she were here or there. So.
Yeah, and so Davos thinks that maybe the gods are punishing them. But of course, the thing about religion is it's very fungible in this way, sort of, he can say, it's because you burned the 7. She could say, it's because you left me at home. Relor was mad at you.
Yes.
Whichever god you believe in is the one who was exacting revenge on you, you know.
Battle of the gods here, I guess.
Yeah.
But it does make this mission at the, I put that in air quotes, so all of you could see that, of course, makes this mission at the end of this chapter feel very religious. He thinks the mother sent this ship. She had a task for him.
Yeah, and although he doesn't say it, it definitely feels like it is getting revenge on Melisandre more than helping Stannis. I mean, obviously, it could be, I've got to get back to help Stannis to achieve his birthright, but it's more, just the sense of it, the sort of steely resolve that seems to sort of come over him definitely feels more like, I'm going to get Melisandre and teach her a lesson. But again, I feel she's a little bit maligned here. She was not the one who ran the whole fleet into the Blackwater Rush.
Yes. That's a solid point. Is what is this something he has to do? He, as he put it, he had to live for a little while more at least. And yes, so there's a few options, like you just mentioned. Take revenge on Melisandre for bringing the gods' wrath down on them. Get to Stannis and help him recover, now that he knows he's alive. Maybe he needs to feels the need, like Stannis has gotten bad advice, and so he needs to be there to help shield him from the likes of Queen Selyse and Melisandre and Queen Selyse's uncle, who is his Hand of the King, Axel Florent.
Yep.
But then there's a fourth option of to tend to his wife and his living sons, Stannis and Steffan, as they find out the tragic news about the rest of their family.
Here's why I think you can pretty much pin it on the revenge on Melisandre. Because he says, I have to live for a little while more at least. Because all of the others are ongoing things. They're not things that... But if you kill Melisandre, then your day is done. And so that's why it feels like that's what he's specifically referring to. It's probably a combination of these things. It would be nice if he would go and give his wife and remaining family some succor in their time of grief. But I think he's gone laser focused on...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. It seems like that, based on the way the chapter unfolded, that seems like the leading candidate. But he also blames himself a lot, in typical Davos fashion. He puts a lot of blame, a lot of focus on his own faults and flaws. Like I mentioned in the summary, he rode her ROWED her into Storm's End, watched the statues burn and did nothing, and also did nothing when Crescent died. There were some lords who did take significant umbrage to the burning of the statues and did try and put up a fight and take a stand. I'm pretty sure they all died. So, that would likely have been the outcome here.
Yes, certainly Crescent died for his...
Exactly, yes. But I just feel like he's being, I get it. He's in a dark place, a very dark place. Dark as you could possibly be in, pretty much. So, but I get that, but he's a bit hard on himself. He in every instance he was doing his king's bidding.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you follow a king as ardently as Stannis does, then you've made that decision. All the decisions from that point onwards are to follow the king. And if the king does things that you later think were bad ideas, well, you've got the get out of jail card of, I said I would follow that king,
Yeah.
If you're not so ardent, if you're a little bit more nimble with your morals, then yes, it's on you for not taking a stand when you had the opportunity to.
Right.
Davos is 100% Team Stannis, and so Stannis can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he's regretting now.
Right. I was just gonna say, I wonder if that might change, if he might be a little more choosy about how ardently he follows Stannis because of this blunder here.
It's funny because at the same time he speaks the truth to Stannis more than his other counselors do.
Yes.
But Stannis is so inflexible that he sort of appreciates it and then completely ignores it.
True.
So
that is a very solid point right there. But so Stannis embraced Melisandre because he said to Davos, he's one of the 4 kings in the realm right now, but he has the smallest army, and she was going to be his secret weapon. So maybe once he got the larger army that was his army combined with a large portion of Renly's army, that he didn't want to rely on her like he did prior. And that's why he was maybe trying to distance himself. He was still flying the sigil that had the flaming heart on it. So, not completely disengaged from her, but maybe he was trying to pull back a little bit because he now had the army and he didn't need her as much.
Yeah, that is interesting because, obviously there was all of this is somewhat strategic. The strategic point of not having her there so that the victory wasn't hers, it was that of the armies.
Right.
But yeah, perhaps the sort of you're absolutely right. While he was the complete outsider to the throne because of the size of his army, he really needed something, he needed a joker.
Right.
And that's what Melisandre was. Well, now he's amassed just about the largest army in Westeros, and so he didn't need her anymore. And so maybe had this gone the right way, maybe she was always going to get further and further ostracized from him.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's possible. Things didn't go that way, but
yes.
It's very...
So now his army shrunk again. He's probably going to go back to her and sort of apologize for his mistakes.
And she'll say, "I told you so."
Yeah.
But of course it's easier to blame Melisandre than it is Stannis. He already had a distaste for her. Yet Stannis benefited from all of her doings and suffered from her one glaring absence. So, he seems to fully blame Melisandre for this issue, for everything that's gone wrong. But not at least not that we've seen, not quite blame Stannis as much, even though Stannis had the ultimate say. And Stannis was getting a lot of benefit from what Melisandre had been doing for him to that point.
Yeah. All of this sort of points to the fact that Davos is a better character than, well, I don't mean a better character, I mean a better person than the likes of Cersei or Joffrey, because, he is soul-searching about his role in the mistakes that have been made. And that's the last thing Cersei or Joffrey would do. They would search others' souls.
Yes, they would. That's a good way to put it. They would definitely find a scapegoat and rationalize why they were not to blame. Well, Davos does the exact opposite.
Davos has previously told us on several occasions that he isn't devout. He said that he prays to the smith for ship health and to the mother for successful birth of her sons, but it's kind of like a habit, a rote thing rather than any kind of devotion. But he does think he hears the voice of the mother here. There's a lot going on. I mean, he is desperately thirsty and fevered, and but this hallucination might sort of open his eyes to sort of like a religious conversion, a sort of Damascenean conversion, if you will, which would further put him at odds with Melisandre.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not the most religious. I don't have the best knowledge of religious texts, but there's probably plenty of stories of non-believers getting signs when at rock bottom and becoming devout. So, will that be the story we see here with Davos as well? Or is it one of those things that helps him get through a tough time, and then when he's back on Dragonstone and he really does have fine wine at hand and a feather bed to sleep on, if he'll discard these notions?
I think even if he's on Dragonstone, he still doesn't get the feather bed. It's still it's just a bigger rock.
That's a good point. So, as we were just saying, this could be just a delirious man hearing voices that might be what he leads him to what he needs in order to get off this rock, gives him the steel his resolution to get to hail the ship. Or could this possibly be the first example that I can think of the Seven doing anything useful in this story? Because so far, it's only been the old gods and R'hllor who have shown any true power. R'hllor, we've seen several instances of the shadow assassin doing doing the bidding of Melisandre, but we've also seen Bran warging and Jon warging. And, being that there is a weirwood tree involved, it seems like there must be likely some old god stuff going on there as well.
Yeah, I gotta say, the Seven Gods are really not stepping up in the same way that the others are. I mean, basically, 3 words to a fevered man. You burned us. A ship that wanders by. I mean, come on. This could have happened without any divine intervention. I mean, I guess, it felt like it was related to his prayers, but yeah.
At least he felt it was that way.
Yeah.
Yes, you make very logical explanations of the whole thing there. The unlikelihood of the ship coming so close to those spires that he knows that ships steer clear of, I guess could add some feeling of divine intervention here.
Okay.
So the little rescue boat that comes from the big Lycene ship, the man on it asks him who he is, and Davos says, I'm a captain. I'm a knight. And I wondered if he went with knight over captain, because any mention of some level of nobility would increase his chances of, at the very least, being taken as captive, rather than if you're just some lowly ship captain, you might be killed or left for dead.
Oh, I see. Yeah. But anyway, all to the good. It turns out they were on his side. So, but he had figured that out, basically, hadn't he? He was pretty confident that he saw that it was a Lycene ship, and so he was.
Yes.
He reckoned they were going to be on his side, but still, it's a scary moment.
Yeah, he had a momentary thought of, this could be one of Joff's, and then clearer head thought, nope, that is definitely a Lycene ship. The striped hull indicates as such. Now, of course, it could have been a ship that Joff's men had taken, because they were short-staffed, but they
true. I mean,
ships.
True. The Lycene ships could have landed on the King's Landing side of the river, and the crew decimated and the ships impounded. Yeah, absolutely, that's true.
Yeah. Or they were only purchased by Stannis.
Right.
They could have gone over.
Switch sides, yeah.
Either way, though, Salladhor Saan if Salladhor Saan survived, which his ships were out at sea, so he had a better chance than the rest, he and Davos are friends, so,
Yeah. Do you have some background for us?
I do have a little background. As you might imagine, again, this chapter was not rife with background opportunities. But, so Davos tells us that the rock formation he finds himself stranded on in the Blackwater Bay is known as the Spears of the Merling King. And I thought, oh, good, I'll look up the Merling King. Well, not a lot of info provided on the Merling King. He seems to be some kind of water god. So that's the best I could do there. However, there is an interesting character associated with the Merling King.
Okay.
That I thought I'd mention. Her name is Ursula Upcliffe, a member of House Upcliffe of Witch Isle, who lived during the coming of the Andals to Westeros. Ursula called herself the bride of the Merling King.
Okay.
And not surprisingly, Ursula was thought to be a sorceress, hailing from Witch Isle and all.
The clues were all there, yes.
Yeah, they were, yes, quite. Anyway, Ursula joined the alliance of First Men houses, petty kings, and clans summoned by Robar II Royce, the High King of the Vale, the Fingers, and the Mountains of the Moon, to fight against the Andals. Ursula rode a blood-red horse in the Battle of the Seven Stars, during which she tried to curse Andal warrior Torgold Tullet, also possibly ancestor to our buddy Ed Tullet of the Night's Watch. However, according to legend, her attempt didn't go very well, as Torgold leapt upon Ursula's horse, grabbed her face, and tore her head off of her shoulders while she screamed for help.
Blimey.
Yeah, so that didn't end well at all. Now, Ursula Upcliffe may be a nod by Martin to the sea witch Ursula in Disney's The Little Mermaid. She was, named Ursula and she was a witch.
Does The Little Mermaid predate this?
I think The Little Mermaid came out in the early 90s.
You know what's strange to me is, for me, all Disney movies are utterly contemporary. They all feel like they came out in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes. I think that one came out in the early. I believe I remember watching that in the early 90s of my life.
As a child.
As a child, yes, exactly. Well, or Ursula could also be a nod to the late, great Ursula K. Le Guin, whom Martin apparently greatly admired, and I have to say on a personal note, as did I. I very much enjoyed her Earthsea series.
I'm currently reading an Ursula Le Guin book.
Oh, yeah.
Lavinia, sort of retelling of Lavinia from sort of Roman mythology.
Oh, wow. Good timing for this particular background piece, then.
So, comparison with the television show, this is captured apart from all of the recapping stuff. He is sunburnt and dry-throated on the rock. He sees a ship. He waves. We don't see the sort of like hesitation about whether he wants to survive. He waves madly. The ship comes. He doesn't recognize any markings on the ship, so he has to take his life in his hands when he declares for Stannis. But turns out they were Team Stannis too. So,
phew.
The next scene, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but the next scene, he's on board the ship talking to Salador San.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Pedantry, I couldn't find anything. The only thing I would say is I think it's a bit strange to have this rock formation in the sea, but, I mean, not impossible.
Right. Yeah. I didn't really have anything either.
So, news and notes. Why don't you take this one? It's very interesting.
Okay, so back in 2012, a decade ago, the bones of a dinosaur were discovered in northern Argentina. And researchers have spent the past decade studying and comparing the bones with existing ones. And on July 7th of this year, 2022, they announced in Current Biology that it is indeed one they've never seen before. And it's in similar size and shape to the T-Rex, including those tiny little arms they have. Yet it went extinct 20 million years before the T-Rex's arrival, so they don't believe there's any connection between the two. So, you might ask yourself, why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because the layperson's name given to this mighty beast is Meraxus gigas.
Meraxus!
Yes, if that sounds familiar, it's because it's named after the dragon ridden by Rhaenys Targaryen herself. Now, Meraxus gigas, whose official name is so long, I don't know that maybe you want to try reading that word?
I think it's Campanus carcharodontosaurid.
Okay, what he said. And so I'm just going to say Meraxus gigas was no small fry, weighing in at what they believe to be 9,398 pounds or 4,236 kilograms. I'll let Simon do the stone conversion if that's required.
Badly.
I'm not sure how they get such a specific number. I mean, they're just weighing the bones. So you'd think they would say somewhere around 94, 9,500. They got it down to the 300
to the pound.
9,398 pounds. That's very specific.
I think that the next thing you're going to say is even more comically specific.
So gigas is derived from the Latin word for giant. And
not that part, the next
Not that part, yes. And of course, it does seem to be quite giant at almost 10,000 pounds and almost 4,300 kilograms. Anyway, Meraxus gigas this particular one was also no spring chicken. The researchers think it could have been as old as 53 years when it died, which, yes, is a rather specific number again.
He had a birthday card under his arm.
Could not have been 54. Had to have been as old as 53. But 53 years makes it the oldest living non-avian theropod currently known. And one other fun fact here, much like dragons from A Song of Ice and Fire, Meraxus gigas continued to grow even after reaching maturity, and researchers believe maturity for Meraxus gigas was somewhere from 30 to 40 years old.
It is astonishing what they can figure out from the bones. It really is.
It is. Yes. How much of... I'm curious. I would love to know how much of that is like, we're pretty certain about that, and how much of it is like, yeah.
Wild like swing. So there's a new paperback edition of Fire and Blood out, which features art from House of the Dragon.
Yeah, it's in
Nice.
trade and mass market paperback form. So I think trade is like that heavier, thicker paperback version, and mass market is the littler version.
We're gonna do the live video chat with our Lord Paramount and Royal Kingsguard on Saturday, July 30th at noon Eastern Time.
That'll be so much fun. Every time when it's over, I'm like, oh, I wish we had more time, because we get into such fun discussions and stuff. I hope more of you will come join us. It's a lot of fun. And also things I hope for is I'd love to have some new 5-star reviews to read. So you write them, we'll read them.
Definitely, for sure. All right, let's conclude this one. So Davos is saved, and by his own side, thankfully. It wasn't one of Joffrey's men that dragged him off the rock, so that's lucky.
Yeah, he could have been saved by the wrong side, and that wouldn't be so great. Yeah, it's really good to... I mean, of course, I knew that Davos was going to be saved, but it's really great because he's a really good POV.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And hopefully we're going to get some inside scoop on what Stannis is up to since losing his battle, because Davos was the only POV connection we had to Stannis.
It'll be interesting to find out what Stannis is up to. Will he have apologized to Melisandre for not trusting her? Will he have disowned her for letting him down?
Right.
We shall see.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be good to see. Hopefully we'll get that. Hopefully he gets back to Dragonstone in one piece, meaning Davos and Stannis. Hope they both get back to Dragonstone in one piece, I guess.
And Devon too.
Yes, exactly. But, despite the hardship that Davos is dealing with here, he's still the same old, self-deprecating, unnecessarily hard on himself Davos that we know and love.
Yes, for sure.
He has a thought. It goes something like, so many braver knights and lords died, better than me and highborn. That's such a typical Davos thing to think.
Yeah. Has he found religion? He definitely thinks he heard the mother, but I think he's also rational enough to know that he was in a weird state when he heard the voice.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, either he thinks he's been spoken to by the mother, and that's going to have a profound impact on him, as it might to someone who just believes they've just been talked to by a god, or that's just his brain rationalizing what it needs to do in order to help him hail that ship and get off that rock.
Yeah.
Survivor's instinct, if you will.
Yeah. And so the big question sort of over this is what did give Davos that inspiration to live? Definitely feels like he's got a task in mind, possibly heaven sent by the mother, or and possibly of various natures, including looking after his family, helping Stannis, or helping Stannis by removing Melisandre.
Yep. Could be any or all of those, possibly.
So as we mentioned earlier, it'd be great if you could go out and leave us a review. We'd appreciate that. You can buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. You can buy us an Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level. We would be greatly appreciative of that.
Absolutely, we sure would. And of course, you can always reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com, which is, of course, our preferred way for you to communicate with us if you have any sort of gripe about the show or anything you want to take up. But you can also follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.